When the ecumenical patriarch agreed to grant autocephaly to the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, there's a theological foundation that is now pretty much written. It's inscribed essentially on the whole fabric of this new church in Ukraine. In the Orthodox Church, we have a different notion of what primacy is than the Roman Catholics have, because the Roman Catholics identified the Pope and ascribed to the Pope ministries that Orthodoxy is uncomfortable with in terms of universal jurisdiction, extraordinary magisterium, being able to teach from the cathedra. Orthodoxy has always been allergic to these kinds of things. But that doesn't mean that Orthodoxy doesn't believe that there isn't one leader among all of the Orthodox, a person who is supposed to unite, a person who is supposed to make sure that everything is happening throughout the world according to order. There's disagreement among Orthodox on how all of this unfolds on the ground, if you will. And so, for example, a number of people thought that Patriarch Bartholomew overstepped his authoritative bounds when he granted autocephaly to Ukraine. Those who received autocephaly rejoiced. They identify Constantinople as their mother church. I think the key to kind of decoding this mystery is the Tomos of autocephaly itself. By defining, a number of us thought that the name of the church would be the Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And so it's this really subtle difference to say it's the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. That was intentional. And the reason it was intentional is because what the ecumenical patriarch is trying to do is to make sure that every church that's autocephalous is limited to its actual national borders. Meaning that Canada and America hypothetically would have their own borders. And in the current system of orthodoxy, and essentially I think that this is what the Ukrainians who asked for autocephaly agreed to, and I'm sure that some of them were uncomfortable with it. I'm sure they were. But they were essentially agreeing to the ecumenical patriarch then is the authority in Canada and in the United States. Now, so far, the patriarchate has not done anything to say that, well, from this point forward, everyone will be directly under a bishop or two or three bishops that he assigns. But he did do this in Western Europe with the Russian exarchate in Paris. They had been autonomous with their own bishop, and it was extraordinarily controversial when the Synod of Constantinople annulled that tomos and reassigned those clergy and people to become fall directly under the ecumenical patriarchate. When he took that action, those people who had their own traditions, not, in some ways similar to what Ukrainians in Canada and the United States experience, a number of them have now turned to Moscow and have renegotiated the terms of their autonomy with Moscow because they feel that the ecumenical patriarch betrayed them. So what we have here is conflicting perspectives. Because according to canon law, every region should be its own church. Hypothetically, Canada could have its own autocephalous church, as could the United States, or perhaps together they could. And it seems that for a number of reasons, probably reasonable, the Orthodox people in these countries aren't ready for that yet. But this is why the ecumenical patriarch wrote the tomos, and this is really the patriarchate, I should say, wrote the tomos of autocephaly to define the OCU as being in Ukraine and prohibiting the OCU from having parishes outside of Ukraine. So, and I want to acknowledge that this is not at all comforting. You know, I can understand why people want to have that connection to Kyiv. I've spoken to some of them myself. And I know that they have had formal conversations with Metropolitan Emmanuel in Paris about the possibility of delaying this or perhaps coming to some kind of an arrangement where they could still remain under Kyiv. So this situation is not definitively resolved yet. The comfort that I would offer is this, is that in the past, both Canada and the United States have turned to the ecumenical patriarchate. Canada turned to Patriarch Demetrios of blessed memory, and the United States turned to now Patriarch Bartholomew. And he received them with good terms in 1990 and 1995, respectively. And he has also put himself at great vulnerability in taking this action and creating the OCU. So far, I think that Patriarch Bartholomew, for the most part, has responded favorably to requests from the Ukrainian people in Canada and in the United States. And we all know that the diaspora community has played an important role in orchestrating what happened in Ukraine in the last 2 years. Here's where I would take comfort. The ecumenical patriarchate, I think that they care about Ukrainians. I think they're very interested in the Ukrainian cause, and there might be some politics involved with this, but I think that nothing is finalized in terms of wanting to have a relationship with Kyiv. And I think what you have in mind here is a formal relationship, perhaps coming underneath the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. And what I would suggest is patience and ongoing dialogue, both with Kyiv and also with the representatives of the ecumenical patriarchate. Because one thing I think we need to be certain of is that for the foreseeable future, I think we're talking at least 25 to 50 years, the OCU is going to remain close to Constantinople. And it will. The best case scenario for Ukrainians in Canada and in the United States is to develop as much as is possible with transparency, a close relationship with the OCU, and then together with the OCU to continuously be in dialogue with Constantinople. And the reason that I say this is that things have gone bad. The one trend that we can see as historians when things have gone bad historically is when one side says, I'm not happy with the way things are going, so I'm going to cease dialogue. So I think that the ecumenical patriarchate would be open to the ideas, the suggestions, the case that Canadians and Americans would like to present to them. In this sense, I think, though, that in the diaspora, Orthodox Ukrainians need to be patient because the situation in Ukraine is so unsettled still that I think it would be helpful to the OCU in particular if Orthodox Ukrainians in the US and in Canada could try to be as patient as possible so that the OCU can really be stabilized. And once it's stabilized and once these relationships are created and nourished, then there will be more possibilities. Look at it this way. Metropolitan Epiphanius still hasn't made a formal visit to Canada or to the United States. He's coming to the US very soon here in October. I don't know what his itinerary is. I know it's involved with the ecumenical patriarchate in some way. So extra patience is going to be needed. I think if we look historically for Ukrainians, having patience has resulted in an outcome that has been favorable to them on more than one occasion with the ecumenical patriarchate. Okay, thank you. Have a good day. Всього доброго.